That's always the cue there. Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate all that you're doing. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order the 5:30 March 13th workshop. We only have one item on the agenda, and it is short-term rental code amendments. And Matt Martin will be leading the discussion. But before we do that, I want to remind everybody I am a short-term rental license holder. So I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion and let the rest of council decide what's best for the city on this particular matter. And when I do that, Andrea, I know you're on Zoom, but you will actually be running the meeting. So be the time hawk and ask questions like you normally do. And I hope you're feeling well and everything's good at home. But I'm done for this particular workshop until this topic is over. And if there's time at the end, I'll jump back on and take control after that. Anyway, thank you. Matt or Andrea?
Go ahead, Matt.
Go with Matt.
Thank you, Mayor, Council President. Good evening, Matthew Martin, City Sisters Community Development Department, joined by Scott Woodford, Community Development Department Director. This is the latest installment of ongoing evaluation of the short-term rental program we have here in City of Sisters. And my goal is just to provide some table setting comments. I do have a few slides that really are a visual reference in support of the staff report that was provided in tonight's meeting packet. So based on the pleasure of the council, I'm happy to run through the slides and or discuss each one of the slides and the draft amendments for consideration. So we'll kind of get started and then pause to see how the council wants to proceed. Want to provide a brief background on how we got here and then yield the bulk of the time to discuss the draft text amendments that I've prepared and then get council's direction on next steps as it relates to you know, what the draft amendments are, how they may be amended, and then when to initiate the formal review process. So again, reiterating that why we're before you is a council goal of this last and current fiscal year is to evaluate the short-term rental code language to mitigate adverse impacts on the community. We've been discussing this over several workshops with various topics and themes beginning last fall, from overview of the current program and impacts of that program and further analysis of related discussion topics as it relates to calls to the sheriff's office, as well as reporting on short-term rental owner survey. And at our last workshop, the council provided direction on a short list of amendments and directed staff to draft some code language and to give a reference to what those changes may look like as code and formal code provisions. And so that's what we're here for tonight. Those changes that were identified by the council at our previous workshop were expanding the concentration limits from the current 250 feet to 500 feet, applying the concentration limit to condominiums, whereas today they are exempt from the concentration limits, and then a prohibition on short-term rentals in new expansion areas of the urban growth boundary and city limits. So just take these line by line, and noting that while that's 3 subject areas, there are several sections that are impacted by these changes that needed to be considered. So with regard to the prohibition in annexation areas, I added it to an existing prohibited uses section, and I took some liberties in drafting this language in that short-term rentals are commonly only or known to be or regulated in residential districts, whereas in commercial districts where they're allowed, they're not subject to the concentration limits, certainly subject to all other operating requirements. But so in that respect, I chose to limit the prohibition to residential districts in annexation areas, but also wanted to provide a an outlet for future councils to consider if there's a situation where allowing short-term rentals in a annexation area may be warranted. Not quite sure what that example may be, but this is certainly perhaps an opportunity to, as an outlet, where if it's allowing short-term rentals in those residential districts, could be agreeable and approved through an adopted or approved annexation agreement. I'll pause for discussion or question or continue on.
Does anybody have any questions? That seems fairly clear.
I don't have any.
I think,
Council President Blum, I have no questions.
thank you, Gary. The one question I do want to cover that was something that Jennifer brought up, and that is that there is no limitation in the commercial zone, and there is a parcel of property in Sisters that we hope ends up being residential but is currently zoned commercial. Would that parcel of property have to be zoned residential in order for it to be residential, or could they apply for that even while it was zoned commercial?
Are you referring to the large block of acreage just north of downtown?
Yes.
Owned by Pacific Crest Development or however they're titled.
Yes.
So this provision would not be applicable to that property. With it being currently zoned downtown commercial, it would be eligible for short-term rentals on, if it's developed with residential uses as permitted within that area of the downtown commercial district. There would not be any imposed limitation on short-term rentals within that.
Okay, so it is okay to put totally residential in a commercial zone. They don't have to apply for a zone change?
They do not. That's an area that's north of Adams Avenue that has a particular carve out for residential uses in the downtown commercial district.
Okay, so when we finish here, I would like to talk about whether we want to do something about that property. Should it end up being totally residential, we might want to limit. I wouldn't want it to be, because it was zoned commercial, be able to have a ton of short-term rentals there because the zoning was commercial instead of residential, if I'm making any sense there.
Makes sense to me.
I have a question for you, for the staff, and that is that the commercial zone allows you to have property developed that's 100% residential. It doesn't require that you have sort of a business residential like we do in some parts of the town component. It can be strictly residential with no business at all?
Correct. For those areas of the downtown commercial district that are north of Adams Avenue, there is that flexibility.
Yeah, just to add to what Matt was talking about, during the efficiency measures process, that was one of the code changes that we looked at. We created a few overlay zones within the downtown commercial area, that being one of them. Several others were on Hood Avenue, where we didn't feel like there were strong pedestrian areas, allowed them to do residential only if they wanted to in those areas.
But if the goal was to look at the efficiency measures and the goal of creating those changes during the efficiency measures, then changing the code to do that, I have no problems with it. But if it doesn't have the short-term rental restrictions on it that other areas do, you've almost shot yourself in the foot on that one. I mean, the goal is to have higher density of housing. If it's not housing, if it's rental housing, I mean, if it's short-term rental housing, it doesn't do anything to solve our housing problem within the city. I mean, I know I'm sounding convoluted, but the reality is it wasn't something I think we thought about when we did that overlay. in terms of the consequences of it, I think the thought was, well, gee, it would get developed and it would be rentals and or private homes. But because of the changes we're making in other areas of the town, that could indeed drive that into a lot more short-term rental activity than perhaps we had anticipated or hoped, which hurts us on the efficiency measures side. So I think we need to be cognizant of that and have a discussion as to what that means. And whether we have inadvertently created a space age gas station issue. Meaning, you know, that original code change was to allow some minor modifications, and all of a sudden we had something coming in that wasn't what we hoped in our community. So I'm trying to avoid that with this.
Understood. And I think now, as in the process is the time before we get to adoption or get a development proposal for any property, only to find out we're not in the position we want to be.
Right.
So we can either stay here and discuss that or follow up at the conclusion.
I'm okay
Yeah.
with following the conclusions so we can get through the rest of the presentation.
Okay. Because I think there are some opportunities to apply either some language for prohibition or potentially applying the concentration limit, you know, in that area. So we could
Okay.
talk that through.
Okay, good.
So next being the section of the code applying the concentration limits. So you're seeing that there's several sections that are changed, but limited in their scope. So first one is increasing the concentration limit from 250 to 500 feet for those zones where it's applicable, generally the residential districts we have in town. That same change that is proposed to subsection 1 is the same as the change to subsection 4. So you're seeing the change from 250 to 500 feet. So moving to subsection number 2, inclusion of condominiums to the description of those multiple dwelling unit properties where the concentration limits would be applicable. Offered to include it here because, you know, since we gave examples, the ADUs, the duplexes, apartments, it seemed worthwhile to provide that clarity that it's also applicable to condominiums. And then removal of subsection 3, that's the carve out that exempted condominiums particularly from the concentration limits. We'll pause there and provide opportunity, Council President.
Does anybody have any questions? It seems pretty straightforward.
None?
None.
Good.
And then addressing those prior existing uses in subsection J of the short-term rental special use standards. So in this subsection 1, it provided clarity that there was opportunity for those short-term rentals approved under the prior vacation rental codes that were in place as of 2013, that they're allowed to continue as non-conforming uses, subject to continued usage as a short-term rental and continued operation and obtaining an operating license. Because we're making these changes to that code that was adopted in 2018, found it important to provide a backstop that those that were approved between 2013 and 2024 can also continue to be as a non-conforming use because of these, even with these changes that are being contemplated today.
You refer to subsection H in A. The use is not abandoned under subsection H of this section. What is subsection H? It's not in the documents that I received. Could you give me the language in that, please?
I'm going to need to, because I'm sharing screen, it's an abandonment of use.
Yeah,
It
but-
really outlines
But
where.
abandonment of
what-
use means, doesn't mean anything to me. I
Yeah.
need to know what that means in the code.
Thank you. Yeah, so what it really, I mean, in short, it identifies what I'm sorry,
Could I hear the language of subsection H, please?
would you like it read verbatim?
Is it 14 pages?
No, but it's a few lines. So notwithstanding the chapter 5.2 nonconforming uses and structures, and except as provided in a temporary hardship exemption issued pursuant to subsection H3 of this section. That was a special carve out for hardship situations that allowed you to not rent it during the required time period. Authorization to operate a short-term rental will be deemed void with no further proceeding or action required by the city if A, short-term rentals use ceases for any period of 365 consecutive days, and or B, the operating license is otherwise revoked.
Okay. Thank you.
It does provide some parameters for those approved prior to 2018 and what the time period of initiation of use. But in essence, it's coming to that you shall use it as a short-term rental within a 365-day time period and timely receive your operating license.
And if the property that falls under this section J is sold, what happens then? Because we've had a discussion about that these licenses are tied to the current use and that a sale did not mean that the license would be transferred with the sale.
This J does not impact, the changes here do not impact that option for transferability. So those that were approved under preceding codes that are allowed to be transferred, that transferability would.
But the later ones, what didn't we have some code language put in later, 2018 or whatever, where that was not transferable?
Correct.
And is that, as code likes to refer to code that likes to refer to code, do we have that circular referral in here so that it's very clear to a realtor or to a buyer or to a seller that that license does not transfer?
It would be subject to those, so we'll make sure that that's captured. But it would, those that were not allowed to transfer under those code provisions, those standards would still be applicable to those short-term rentals.
So I know there's a house that became a short-term rental not very far in one of the neighborhoods that's back up for sale, and the realtor is advertising it as transferable as a short-term rental, and under the code, it wouldn't be.
Okay.
And so I think we just need to be real clear and concise in language that the average person can read and understand, that somebody doesn't make a purchase assuming one thing. Like when the realtor sold the property across the creek and said, well, I talked to everybody that was next door. It didn't talk to me. I'm a neighbor. I would have bought it and then donated it to the city.
Understood.
And so, I think there's a lot of assumptions that are made sometimes by our friends in the real estate market and also by sellers and buyers that, A, we're not paying attention, or B, it's a little simpler than it looks. So I want us to be clear with this, as this is a change of things, that we don't have any dark corners that someone can back into and say, you never told me.
Understood. Yeah, so acknowledging that the interest and certainly the intent was to never change that limit on transferability for those approved after 2018. We'll certainly ensure that that's captured
Okay.
In any of the language.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this section?
No,
Nope. Okay.
I'm good.
So that was the extent of the package of amendments that I'd prepared for today. Happy to entertain any additional tweaks to those standards or other considerations, and then of course open it up for discussion on that idea of some specific standards for the property that we've discussed in the downtown commercial district, or perhaps others. So I will pass it to Council President Bloom.
I know that Jennifer was concerned about the fact that we have so many dates that are involved, like certain rules apply to these rentals, different rules apply after a certain date and whatnot. And I don't see any way that we can modify that and make it all uniform without us being considered taking value from a property. And I think we would end up being sued. So I think that this is probably as clean as we can do it. We do have properties that we've changed the ability of what people can do with their property, but we are only changing the ability of in the future. We're not doing it retroactively. So that puts properties, depending upon the year that the person applied for their short-term rental, in different situations. And I know that that's complicated, but I don't see any way around it. How does the rest of the council feel about that?
I agree with you.
I think you've said it well. That's why I was asking such directed questions about, I knew there was a time period we discussed at the beginning of this, when licenses were no longer automatically transferred with sale. And I wanted to be sure we captured that date, knowing that we couldn't do much about the dates before.
Right. Okay, does anybody have any questions before we move on to the discussion about the specific couple of locations that are zoned commercial but can be used for residential, and we want to make sure that they don't end up being just a bunch of short-term rentals?
I have no further questions.
Okay. So Matt, what do you suggest? I mean, I think you understand where we're coming from. We don't want, undoubtedly we did a special overlay there, but with certain intentions in mind. And we, like Gary said, we don't want those intentions to end up backfiring on us by something coming in that isn't what we intended.
Would it be helpful to kind of scope out what actually is allowed in the downtown commercial on that particular, yeah, there we go, property?
Yes.
I think low density residential is not allowed on that property, right? Single family or
The density is between 30 and 50 units per acre, so that indicates multifamily.
but concentration limits aren't applicable to downtown commercial.
But since we're changing, I'm assuming we're talking about the area. Which area we refer that area? Thank you very much. That's what I thought. It seems to me that moving that from a commercial use to a residential use, which is what I think I heard, allows us to have additional language basically saying that it is that the short-term rental component, short-term rental language must apply to this property that's being, I don't want to say it's not rezoned, and that's the problem, but we're allowing that kind of a use in that particular area. And I'm very uncomfortable if we make it multifamily housing, which is what we're talking about, that's what we want. And we don't have any kind of a restriction, any restriction. An entire floor could be.
Well, hotels are permitted use in that zone too, right?
Right, but I don't think, but that you're talking about that is residential, not hotel. I mean, we're cutting, I know we're slicing the lemon 14 ways here, but the reality is that the intention was not for a hotel. If it had been a hotel, we wouldn't have changed the zoning because you could have put a hotel there. We talked about allowing it for residential use. That's a change in the use of what we would do with the downtown commercial core. And that's different than a hotel or a boarding house. To me, it's a residential unit. It doesn't have any commercial activities occurring within it. And I understand where it lives. I understand that you could do something else with it, but if they do something else with it, fine. But if it's housing, if it's residential housing, and that's all it is, I think it should be subjected to the same limits as the other residential areas of the community.
So, why are we not rezoning it?
Well, that's a whole different effort and process
Ah,
to rezone that.
Expensive?
I mean, I'd be curious to explore maybe with staff and legal counsel of how to write code language similar to what we've done following the efficiency measures to carve out a certain specific location, between large and locus, et cetera, short-term rentals, are not allowable use for residential development. Right, because someone could come in and propose a hotel, it's a permitted use in that zone today.
But that's fine.
Yeah, but if they're proposing.
But it's not
condominium-
it's not a residential use. A hotel is not a residential use by its definition. We're talking if it is used solely for residents for the purposes of increasing our efficiency measures. But a hotel there doesn't help the efficiency measures any.
Right.
no.
So that's the whole goal. The goal was on the efficiency measures. So either we've screwed up in doing it, or we should have rezoned it. If the answer is that we can't apply these to it, I would be 100% behind the rezoning.
Yeah.
If we want it for residential. If we don't want to rezone it, then let's take the residential overlay off of it. I mean, I think that's where you have to go.
Unless we can, Gary, is it possible that we could change the SDR code for, well, hear me out.
I am listening.
Yeah,
Thinking.
STR code for this particular overlay. Identify it and say that in this particular overlay, that we're saying it's a residential overlay, we want our STR limitation of 500 feet to apply.
I think that's what I was saying, but I think I was hearing the manager
that's-
say that they weren't sure you could do that.
Well, let's ask if we can. Can we do that? I mean, is that going to be easier than trying to rezone them?
I think it comes to how that language is crafted.
Okay.
And we clearly understand where where and how to apply. I think what it comes down to is the concentration limits, or is it the concentration limit or
Concentration will solve it.
allowing short, okay,
Concentration limit.
so applying,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Some method of, again, this is kind of in the details,
Mhm.
and we're kind of doing this in real time, but, and I guess I'll ask a follow-up. So on the map, we have 3 areas where multifamily is allowed as a minor conditional use.
Okay.
Are you looking to apply this?
I think it
This-
should be applied all 3, don't you?
I mean,
those 3 instead of
yeah. So it wouldn't be
one particular of
yeah.
those areas?
So any overlay that's residential would then come under this STR limitation. Is there a problem?
Do we have licenses that are, that are multifamily that have short-term besides condominiums currently?
There,
Those are not permitted.
yes, and I'm aware of one particular, 4 units on one property in the downtown commercial district that are all short-term rentals. It's outside of these
Not a hotel,
Overlays.
but all units are a short-term rental. within-
because they're dwelling units.
Yeah.
By definition.
Okay.
I think it's tricky, and I get that. But the minute I heard efficiency measures and they don't apply, I have problems with that. So I think we just have to figure it out. I mean, I don't want to take and tell somebody they can't build cottage units or something like that that are essentially like we have across the street in the downtown commercial core. I don't have a problem with that. I think what we're talking about are residential units. And so if someone is coming in and building a large apartment building, I believe that the STR overlay should apply. If someone is coming in and building commercial downstairs and residential upstairs, that's, I mean, it's tricky, and I get it, that's a different beast. And, or if they're coming in and the whole property is developed, even though it may look like a residence is developed as all short-term rentals, I don't have a problem with that. I'm really talking about what we're referring to, allowing new types of construction within the commercial zone that we're calling residential. And we either take the word residential off and let the chips fall where they may, or we need to apply the same kind of overlay that we do in any other residential area.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that complicated to me, you know, just as we've got a residential overlay and we have requirements for residential that should apply. Right? Okay.
Is that chapter 2.4 or does it go in chapter 2.15? You know, where conditional uses are, you know, where conditional use is granted for multifamily development within the downtown commercial short-term rentals or not?
I think we'd have to kind of study that and kind of come back with a proposal on how best to address that.
I know it's not as simple from the legality of code standards as we would like it to be, and I get that. But that's your job.
Right,
Yeah.
no, that's the fun stuff.
My job is to make you
Yeah.
miserable.
Did I hear that were you drawing a distinction between pure residential development on that property versus mixed-use development? Do you see them differently in
I
terms
think
of?
I do. I think mixed use development, that gets a little bit trickier. I mean, if it's pure residential, I heard you say that's what that purpose was. Now, did I mishear you when you?
So it's an overlay zone, meaning that they can still do commercial on that property. They can still do mixed use,
Right.
but they could also do residential only, which is not something that other properties in the downtown
Right.
commercial can
And so
do.
I think any part of that that's done residential only
Only.
Okay,
is what I'm really referring to. If somebody comes in and does a mixed use, that's really what we want to see. Right?
Yeah.
Storefront downstairs, living space upstairs, that kind of a thing.
that's what you have to do in all the other parts of downtown
Right.
commercial. We just changed that because we've heard that that can be a barrier to housing,
Yes.
having to provide the commercial.
Right.
But you want to still apply the concentration limits to even those cases though, because those are units of housing above commercial.
I don't know. That's a good question. It's, somewhere we cross the line between residential and commercial use, and I don't know where that is. And I mean that in the kindest way. I'm not trying to be facetious. I think that that when we're talking about an apartment building, that's clearly residential use. When we're talking what we have out in Sun Ranch and some other areas where we have primarily commercial use with some type of living unit upstairs, that's a little trickier. To me, that falls under the
Condo.
concept of, that might fall under the condo
Mhm.
side of things, yeah.
I-
So I don't know. I mean, I don't want to restrict someone being able to come in and put a business in this town that employs people and keeps them working and having even housing upstairs that their employees can live in, or itinerant employees can live, which is short term. And so I think that's a trickier one. But really, the piece I hear is when I heard the word residential, I hear just strictly people living there. You know, might have a laundromat in the basement, but
Yeah, I also agree that,
so we're not making it easy.
that, what Jordan brought up is that if it's a, mixed use, that we should consider applying the condo rule to that percentage that can be, STRs. Because,
Apartments above, and not condos.
well, I'm saying apply the condo code for the apartments above. You know, in other words. You know,
One
if
per
there's-
unit.
If there's 15 units, one of them, you know, has to be, can be an STR, but not more than that or something like, I don't know what the.
I think
percentage is.
the reality is, in my mind, is that yeah, I don't know. But I come back, I'm looping back around and I don't know how to deal with what you just said. And maybe the condo solution is the easiest one. because it's kind of a quasi
Mhm.
use, two different uses. But
Yeah.
where it's strictly residential, I want the overlay to apply.
Yeah, and I think we all agree on that one. I think we're, right? We're on the same page there. You're there, right?
Or any of the language
Vice
for
President.
apartments or whatever.
Vice President Blum?
You know me, I'm the one that doesn't think it ought to be 500 feet. So
Well, but what do you, on the different topic, instead of okay, so we've talked about the residential and applying the 500 feet for the residential overlay. Then now we're on to the mixed use. So if someone comes into this commercial zone and does a mixed use building with apartments on top and businesses below.
We have some of those.
yeah, I think that that's commercial and it should, short-term rentals should be allowed.
Okay.
Now, on a big parcel like that, theoretically, we could have both, could we not?
Yeah.
We could have a commercial section and then we could have an apartment building next door.
Correct. And so that's why I keep saying that, to me, the distinction in my mind is really between mixed uses of a building, i.e. primarily commercial with some places to live upstairs or whatever. That's still commercial in my mind versus strict apartments. Now, you can argue apartments are commercial, as an owner, they're gonna make money and all those things, but the reality, we're talking about housing units and we're talking about that density. And I want to do everything I can to push that density where it needs to go, so that when we have to annex land, should we, that we don't have to annex a big chunk all at once, we can annex a smaller chunk and do this in an intelligent manner. Although I use the word intelligent, I guess I should be out of the room, but I just think it's important that if our purpose was housing efficiency, let's be sure it's housing efficiency. If it was something else, let's call it something else and go on.
We process applications with different uses like mixed use and then standalone. Conditional use for a standalone building that's just residential. So say that property owner comes in with a development proposal and one building along Locust is a mixed use building, but behind that would be a standalone, multifamily building. Is that just a mixed use development application, or do we process it with a conditional use for a multifamily residential component too?
Yeah, the use category is a mixed use building
Yeah.
or multifamily, depending on that configuration. So if that's clear.
So both, so we could apply one rule to the all residential building and a separate rule for the.
Yes.
I envision that, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure we actually.
Well, and that's what,
technically-
and that's what I was thinking
that
too,
in.
but you said it so much better than me.
I
That's
don't.
yours. That's why you're the city manager and I'm just the flunky on the other side of the table.
Yeah, there may be opportunity, within the kind of the details. And I'm not trying to get ahead of the council, but, so we have on this map, these particular 4 distinct areas where 3 allow for multifamily, and then the 1 remaining is triplex and multifamily, all requiring the conditional minor conditional use. Is the interest in applying the concentration limits to all 4 of these areas? Is there a particular aspect of that you'd want to limit it to 1, some, or all? And then recognizing that the language in particular is multifamily, that's a use category, and triplex.
I think that if we're talking multifamily and triplex, if we're talking an apartment building, I think just you just said, what Jordan just said is that yes, you apply the overlay. If they're coming in and they're doing some of the things that we've seen downtown that work very well, that are mixed use with some living space above, for whatever reason, to me, that's commercial, and I think we keep it commercial. That's what we would have called it, and that's what we're doing. And that doesn't really help, it helps us with our efficiency measures, but it was never designed to help us with our efficiency measures. These choices were designed to help us with our efficiency measures.
Okay, so if I can summarize to make sure I understand. Those 3 that have the overlay of residential, we are saying we would like to have those have the 500 constraint, 500 feet constraint. The one that has the mixed use, multifamily, excuse me, units, et cetera, triplexes, that we're not saying we are going to apply the 500.
No, that's not what I'm hearing at all. I
just-
think all 4 of the properties, if a proposal comes in for housing, triplex, multifamily apartments, whatever, if it's residential housing, the short-term rental rules should apply. If an application comes in that is commercial, that also has some housing built in with it, it would not apply because it was commercial. But what we need to know is, can we do that in a fashion that the community understands when they buy property or invest in property, that that is the way we've divided it up? Or are we just making a nightmare?
Well, I think the answer to that is to use a similar map to how we divided up the different areas of the downtown commercial so that it was clear. Having that overlay map is probably the best tool to make sure that people understand where the different areas are. I just wanted to note, the three squares overlay zones that are labeled multifamily between 30 and 50, those are the areas that were subject to changes that came about as part of the efficiency measures. The other one is simply just a restating, a visual restatement of what already existed in the code prior to that. So that was not an effort to increase efficiency with the code changes. And then the same with the figure just above. It's basically that point of that was just to restate what are unique design standard, development standards for the Adams Street area that we already had in the code.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure that if your motivation is just to address all the areas we changed for the efficiency measures, that was not one of them.
Okay.
Council, I think you heard some public comment too about a potential project and potentially in one of these areas. That was a question for Matt or Scott, if that one of these overlay areas included that potential project that was looking at possible short-term rentals, right?
Right. Yeah, that was for a project on property on Adams. And that would be a case where it was a mixed-use building with
Okay,
commercial
that was mixed
downstairs
use. Okay.
and dwelling units upstairs.
Yeah, I think that, clearly if somebody wants to be creative, they could figure out make an apartment building with a commercial component to it, I guess. But the reality is, I think that that's kind of what we depend on you guys to look at, talk about. But, and there's nothing to keep someone from doing all commercial in that overlay zone. We're not preventing that. We're not preventing a hotel. We're not preventing it to become all commercial. We're saying that if you wish to develop apartments in this area, then we'll allow that through conditional use. And I'm saying that if we're going to allow that through conditional use, that the overlay should apply to that particular structure. Or there's no reason to change the overlay.
Okay, is that something that you guys feel that you could write up something that would make that happen for us?
Nodding their heads.
We'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you thought, yeah. Okay, I know that Jennifer was very concerned about that too. She's the one that brought it up. And I don't think any of us had really looked at it, the property that way, and recognized that that was a potential fallout from should we pass this code. So I think we're all in agreement that residential is residential. And I don't care if it's apartments or triplexes or what it is. If it's exclusively residential, then short-term rental laws and codes should apply. If it's mixed, then that's different. Then it's commercial and it doesn't apply. So it depends on what the application comes in as.
Okay.
Anything else?
Just want to reiterate that, make sure, one last time.
Uh-huh.
As we look at the variety of, we have two figures, all of which address residential uses in the downtown commercial district, from single-family duplex townhomes, cottage developments in that area in proximity to Adams Avenue. And then we have the additional areas where multifamily and triplexes.
Right.
We're looking at applying the concentration limits to all of those residential use, standalone residential.
Yes, I
uses.
believe so. I mean, I don't want to keep somebody from building a ski inn and having some rental
Understood.
apartments upstairs. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to ensure that land that we're trying to move and make amenable to being multifamily housing or apartments is used for that purpose. And the other kinds of uses that we currently see in the downtown core, like I use ski inn as an example, but that's, to me, that's the kind of businesses I'd love to see along our Main Street and along these other ones where you've got sort of this kind of a bed breakfast or whatever you want to call it, approach to a business and you know, so I get that, that's where my brain is today.
Okay. Thank you.
Just so we're clear on everything. And so in the downtown commercial and those areas that are straight residential, is the concentration limit that you want one per building like it is in other areas, or you want to apply the 500-foot concentration?
I think you'd use, if it's an apartment building, I think you'd use the same language you have in here for apartments. Why would we do it differently? Just because of where it's cited?
One per lot.
One per. I mean, the 500 would do the same thing. But that's, I think that's what we're saying on condos and what we're saying on apartments. So I don't have a problem with that language just staying the way it is. I mean, I keep calling the overlay and the 500 feet, but reality, back in my mind, that language that we looked at initially related to
Let me ask,
condominiums and apartments.
so if we've got a condo and it's got an SDR in it, so if there's a residential within 500 feet and they want to have an SDR. So if you've got a condo, now you've got a building you're building a residential house next to the condo has an STR. So does the 500 feet apply to that residential house? Or,
That's the question, I guess, that to you guys. How would that work?
yeah,
Does every property get one per lot? Or if it's just multifamily, then per lot, not subject to the 500-foot buffer?
yeah. So it,
Simple, doesn't it?
yeah, because if I've got a house with the 500 feet thing and then they build a condo next to it, what part of that condo is still within the 500 feet? Right? So the STR would have to be at least 500 feet away, right? Yeah. Okay.
The property.
So the 500 feet only applies to the houses, residential houses, cottages, single units. But when we get into an apartment building or condos, now we're only talking
No,
percentage.
I think short-term rental cannot be approved on a property within 500 feet of another property zone, RMFR, SRR, UAR, or NSBP. I mean, I think that makes it pretty clear that if the condo has a short-term rental in it, that 500-foot circle gets drawn around it. Whether there's only one allowed in that building or not, I think that's what that language says. I don't think we have to worry about making any changes. It's pretty clear right there. I may not write code, but I can read it.
So thinking about next steps, and if we, there's, I guess, two pathways since we've added this new section. We could come back for another workshop to vet that language or move forward and craft the language in the spirit of what the council wants and move forward with kind of the formal review process.
Yeah, do you want to see it again before we start the public hearing process and?
With the planning commission.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on which of the two of them are writing it.
Get him, Gary.
I think that I want to say that I'm comfortable with that it's pretty clear what we expect. And that we could probably have that come to us as part of the package and not have to have another workshop. But how bad do we derail the process if the language comes in and we go, oh my God, what did you do? I don't think that's gonna happen. So I'm comfortable. Personally, I think I'm comfortable with seeing it in a more formal process, but that's just me. What about President Blum? I talked over you, by the way, sorry.
No problem. We're going to possibly hear testimony at a public hearing that we may want to change language based on that as well. So I don't think it has to be perfected before we can move forward with a public hearing.
Good point. We've talked this thing to death.
Yep.
But you've done a real good job of taking our talking you to death and making it alive. So thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And, okay, well, we will, continue on, and make the necessary additions and clarifying, the other point of, the limit on transferability of those approved since 2018.
Yep.
So capturing
Yep.
that, make sure we don't, disconnect that requirement. So, thank you for this discussion. If there's
So work.
absolutely, and we'll then get started with the planning commission and next steps there with public hearings and formal review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Looks like we got about 7 minutes, so it's a good time to take a break, and we'll conclude this workshop and into the regular city council meeting in about on time. We had a good. Golly. All right, everybody. Everybody ready to go? I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, March 13th, regular city council meeting. It's 6:31 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Roll call, Rebecca.
Mayor Preden,
I'm here.
Council President Blum,
Here.
Councilor Ross,
Present.
Councilor Cobb.
Here.
All right, next item up is the approval of the agenda. I need a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's 4-0. Visitor communication. The mayor asks if there's any visitor communication.
There is one, Michael.
Michael, good evening. We moved it over.
It's very damp.
Hello.
Last time here, I told you I could be reached through the sheriff deputies. They were told how to contact me through the Office Depot manager. I gave how to make contact if they don't see me. Of course, when I show up here, like now, a message can be handed over. I have also mentioned I quickly scan your local weekly paper. This does not mean reading, just scanning the local letters, possibly a couple paragraphs elsewhere. Today's front cover, lower fold, I did this under the title Protecting the Sisters Community, which included, quote, 2 calls in February 2023, only 3 days apart, and 2 lives saved through professional care, quick thinking, and intervention. Skipping some words. Paramedics got a patient with a self-inflicted gunshot transferred to a waiting air ambulance. Stop. Skipping some words. quote, a sister's patient with significant head trauma causing unconsciousness. Sister's paramedic saved the patient's life, unquote. Then it spoke of awards, etc. I innately did not like awards, etc., offered in my young 20s. Since then, not wanting anything in return when stepping up and doing what anyone should do. Apparently, like perhaps in another time, in another culture, a real one here on this continent, now taken over by those who are alien to me, as you know. If I were a paramedic, I would not partake in the awards or celebrations, even with the bagpipes playing, for it would be a form of social poison. There's been a few out there who have been the same way, including ones long ago I knew, such as a medic in the Army for approximately 5 years who wanted no extra attention for it, and an Army colonel for 20 years who decades ago I spent some cold nights with at his large property and its small backwoods cabin in the region of Fort Ross, California, who, when I sometimes called him on Veterans Day, always said, it was my choice. It was a job. Not wanting any special recognitions, though said it was nice to hear from me. What I recognized, disliking pomp, not wanting pats on the back, particularly when there's unconscionable things happening everywhere all the time, including right in front of your face. It's the underlying conditions which creates, or at least is prominently instrumental in what is noticed on the surface, including suicides, drug abuse, both street drugs and dealing with existence through pharmaceuticals, and the alcoholism, and all types of crimes, including active shooters crawling out into the public, and horrifyingly invading battles and wars. The 2 men I mentioned, by the way, were part of the Nam era. The underlying conditions is bred and reinforced by many in your modern popular religion and by those in what they call mental health services and its management. I just stopped what I was just writing. You have heard it. So I went on to this because it's not a fairy tale, nor a story, nor for a book, nor for writing, reading, talking, and discussing when it's for knowledge, intelligence, and soulless, conscious, dead wisdom. It's not a play, not an opera, nor for more and more and more folk, bluegrass, blues, jazz, or rock songs, nor am I a movie. Yes, in your consumer, humanless parasiting, psychological cannibalizing society, it's legal under your laws. I knew a little when younger, a couple people who euthanized themselves for this underlying reason. Last page. As you know, I'm waiting. It's very serious and I'm still waiting for someone to stand up by my side for a short time. The only thing necessary must be a real human, a real man, or a real woman. I can practically feel Sitting Bull laughing so hard in the grave. An enormous earthquake tears apart everything that holds this country together, and Mother Goddess and the living life force brings on a storm to match. So, should I always be careful what I feel? When I see the psychiatrist, I will bring up this subject.
Thank you, Michael. All right, no more visitor communication. Next up is the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
We have- Do we have to mention the change or anything like that?
Yeah, if you could read out that change, great.
If we all agree, the 228 workshop minutes were amended. The following language shall be used to approve the consent agenda with the amended language, which says council discussed working in the coming year on identifying categories of crimes and sisters for the sheriff department to track. The categories would serve to create more meaningful information about the crime rate in sisters. So if someone could read that motion, that would be great.
I move to approve the consent agenda with the following amendment to the 2/28 workshop minutes. The amendment is, council discussed working with, in the coming year or identifying categories of crime and sisters for the sheriff's department to track. The categories would serve to create more meaningful information about the crime rate in sisters.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second with the amended minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you, everybody. Okay. We got through it.
Yay.
All right. On to council business. The first item is a discussion and consideration of resolution 2024-05 regarding enterprise zone.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I'll give the staff report, and Eric Strobel, our Economic Development Manager, will be up here to help answer questions about this. EDCO is the administrator of our enterprise zone, which we're included with Redmond. So it's a greater Redmond area enterprise zone. The city of Sisters actually doesn't have any current tax abatement eligible companies as part of the zone, although that can change in the future. But resolution 2024-05 is a resolution that establishes a school district support fee of 15%. This is required per state legislation that was passed last year that established the school support fees where enterprise zones, which I think there's about 75, 76 maybe in the state, are now required on the extended abatements. So years 4 and 5. So enterprise zone abatements can be either 0 to 3 years or up to 5 years. So on years 4 and 5, school districts are now entitled to between a fee between 15 and 30% of the property tax abatement. And if you're familiar with enterprise zones, I'm not intending to get too much into the detail, but the program allows companies to apply for a tax abatement on any capital construction or improvements to their property, things like machinery, new buildings, things associated with investments they're making in town, not on the land, right? So long story short, each part of the governing body of our enterprise zone, which includes the city of Redmond, city of Sisters, Deschutes County, we have to approve a resolution that allows us to establish this required school support fee. The school districts, both Sisters and Redmond, agreed to the 15%, and then the city of Redmond approved the resolution last night. So we're in front of you now to get your approval of this resolution to establish a 15% fee. Again, there isn't any companies currently that are on the extended abatement that this would apply to. So the soonest we would see that applied would be 4 years from now if one happened to knock on our door for seeking an enterprise zone abatement. And then Deschutes County would have to approve it after the city council. So happy to entertain any questions about this resolution, but we appreciate you hearing it and approving it tonight.
Yeah. What exactly is economic development?
I wish this was a more fun subject.
It
really
can
not.
be. Let's make it. Let's do a word association game with
Expected
economic
a
development.
huge crowd too. I don't know where they
Yeah.
went.
So, yeah, economic development's helped so many of our local businesses. Some we've heard of, and some you don't know very well. I like to think of some of the things that are have been very visible. Obviously, Laird Superfood for a number of years hired they got over 100 employees at one time, and were very instrumental in bringing a lot of activity to town. One that's going now, I like to talk about, is Holy Cacao. You see them in a lot of our coffee shops around town, and There are some great products and they're sisters based, great. So,
Yeah, yep,
um,
absolutely.
yeah, and these are the types of people that we want to help if we can. And I think this is an easy way to do it. Does anybody have any questions? Council President Blum?
No.
Okay.
And just to verify, we've got two enterprise zones right now on the 3-year abatement. And
3-year.
yeah, you're right that we don't have a 5-year abatement, and I don't think Sisters ever has had a 5-year.
A long term, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got personalized nutrients and Sisters Coffee are the two that are active right now.
Right. So we could probably entertain a motion of some type.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve resolution 2024-05, a resolution of the City of Sisters as part of the governing body of the Greater Redmond Area Enterprise Zone, and approve the establishment of school support fee of 15%.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any final discussion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Eric. All right. Urban Growth Boundary Expansion Consultant Services.
Scott's going to come up and give the staff report. I'll just say this is the culmination, another milestone in this long journey the city's been on as we explored our housing needs, efficiency measures. I mean, it even goes back to the visioning process and the comprehensive plan. So it's a sizable contract in front of the council for considering for consultant services. And this is moving the needle again to bring experts on board to help us through this process. It's going to take up to 24 months. So the contract kind of reflects, the level of effort, but also the time it takes cities to go through long range planning and growth planning, and looking at adding lands into our urban growth boundaries. So Scott will give the presentation, but just kind of wanted to mark the milestone here that we're taking just another step that has been this is a monumental step of finally committing dollars towards bringing consultants on, but it's been a journey just to this point. A lot of work to go.
Thank you, Jordan. Yeah, so what's before you tonight is a request for approval for a professional services contract with the firm MIG for work to be done on the Urban Growth Boundary Amendment. Per our city contracting standards and requirements, we put out an RFP for consultants and had it open for about 5 or 6 weeks. And we got one proposal in. So it wasn't a competitive process, but we did still do an interview with them to make sure that that they understood that what we were looking for in terms of the approach to the project. And here's a little bit more about their experience. And their experience is pretty vast in both Oregon and Central Oregon, and specifically Sisters. We've been working with them. MIG, formerly APG, Angelo Planning Group, helped us out with our comprehensive plan, did all of our analyses, like our housing needs analysis, did the efficiency measures work, did the housing plan update, and then helped us with most recently the UGB sufficiency report, where we kind of updated all the information and determined what our need was going to be, and that kind of helped provide the basis for where we are now, moving to this next step. The contract's for $239,106. Of that, we have gotten approval from DLCD for a housing planning assistance grant that will, for $100,000, that will go towards helping defray that cost. And then the remaining $139,106 would be from contract services, which, given the length of this project, could span 3 fiscal years potentially. The timeline is starting basically as soon as we can after this contract. It'll probably be given spring break and everything like that. It'll probably start up in earnest in early April, and is scheduled to the UGB amendment portion is scheduled to end in September of 25. Jordan mentioned some additional time. There is an additional task called area planning that we can do. We can start afterwards. That would add some time onto that. But the UGB to hopefully get to the finish line of the UGB process, September 2025. So in terms of the scope of what they're going to do for that, we did ask that they put a particular emphasis on public engagement, knowing that that's an important thing anywhere, especially in Sisters, and trying to make sure that the public is aware at all points of time regarding what's going on, what the process is, where the opportunities are to engage. There are some specific points where we will be going out for public input on certain aspects of this process. And so task one is project kickoff and project management, and a big component of that is public engagement, creating a public engagement plan, which will lay out kind of all the tools that we're going to utilize to reach the public and at what points in time. And then this is also the time where we'll be forming a steering committee. And this committee will be this, you guys are important, but this will be the central guiding body for this project, which is, so it's a group similar to how we process the comprehensive plan, where we had an advisory committee that helped to really kind of dig deep into the policies and the goals and kind of give a real community sounding board to those policies. Planning Commission Council, we're still important parts of that process, but we really got the community input through that committee. And so this would be a similar type of body that would review draft materials, assist with engagement, and make key decisions during the process. They would be all public meetings with public input. It's anticipated that there'd be like 7 to 8 different steering committee meetings over the whole process. And it would consist of a combination of some elected and appointed officials, city staff, ag and forest interests, landowners, and interested community members. And so the idea is that we're looking for people that have some expertise and some knowledge, but also round out that committee with some folks who are just part of the broader community too, so that that process will help us anticipate any community priorities and concerns. So that's step one. That'll go through the end of April, and then stepping into task two is finalizing the land need. We think that this process will go fairly quick because a lot of the information is pretty fresh. We just reviewed a lot of that with the sufficiency report. So when I say finalize land need is updating the needs assessments and updating the buildable lands inventory to see what development activities occurred, and really honing in on what the need is for housing, what the need is for employment uses, what the need is for parks and those kinds of things, so that forms what we call the factual basis for the rest of what we do. It's an important step, because that'll determine kind of the acreage and the different amounts of each type of use. That will result in a steering committee meeting. It would also result in Planning Commission Council review of that report, that land need report. And then once we get that done in June, step into task 3, which is to establish and analyze the study area. You've seen the maps that we've put forth in previous planning documents, where there's the existing boundary of Sisters, and then there's a half-mile radius around, then there's a mile radius around it. And that's when we start getting into really the prescriptive kind of process that the state lays out in terms of how you analyze, how you draw the map, and how you analyze which properties, the suitability of those properties for urbanization. And so it goes through different review processes. Like one is efficient accommodation of the land needs, which, taking a look at, for example, are the parcels big enough to facilitate urbanization, or are they already been divided into such small pieces, a bunch of small lots that it makes it more challenging to urbanize? So it's kind of taking an analysis of kind of what's out there. The suitability assessment of needed land types. It also has a provision for identifying restrictive CC&Rs out there that might be an obstacle that we need to identify. We also consider the orderly and economic provision of public facilities and services. How economical is it going to be to expand transportation services, utility services out to the properties? So we'll get Public Works, School District, and Parks input on that. And then compatibility with proposed urban uses with nearby agricultural and forest activities. So it's not only just contacting the potential properties that might be included in the urban growth boundary, but considering what those future urban areas might be adjacent to, and how compatible would that be once all those areas develop. So it's taking a look at compatibility. This is the time where we'll start engaging the community pretty heavily with different tools. I think we're going to resurrect our community conversations that we did with the comprehensive plan, where we go out to different organizations and try to get on their agendas of their meetings and give them an update on what's going on, versus kind of the traditional open house where you try to invite people in and 5 people show up. Sometimes it's going to where people are and trying to deliver the message. Stakeholder meetings, we'll be meeting with city, county staff and boards, and we'll also be meeting in particular with land use advocacy organizations, such as you have COBA, and you also have Land Watch, are groups that come to mind that we want to specifically engage with and make sure that, that we hear their concerns and they understand what's being proposed. So this will all result in an expansion area evaluation report that will take us into task 4 in September of 24. And this is where we'll start thinking about alternatives evaluation and preferred alternative. So it's basically taking a look at where the different areas on various sides of the town make the most sense to be brought in, and what combination of those properties might make sense. So kind of evaluating those alternatives. And that will go through kind of an initial concept will be created by staff in conjunction with the consultant, in conjunction with the steering committee. And then we'll go out to the community and get some feedback on that. And then we'll come back to that and review that with planning commission and council, so that we come up with the community comes up with a preferred alternative in terms of which combination of lands or where that expansion area makes the most sense. And that takes us into task 5, which is the findings and the adoption. So that's kind of the formal land use submittal that we need to make one to the county and one to the city for the actual amendment. And there's a whole hundreds of findings that you have to make, legal findings. And so that's where the consultant really earns their money, is writing those findings. But those are what we take forward, similar to how we prepare a staff report with findings for something that goes in front of the council now. It'll just be like 10 times as big, I think. And that would go through public hearings with the city planning commission and council, and also with the county. The county has to adopt changes to their comprehensive plan. And in other communities I've seen, it seems to be most efficient where that meeting with the council and the board takes place in a joint meeting, where the decision is made in a joint meeting. So that at that point, if it's adopted, it would go forward to the state for acknowledgement. We're going to be closely communicating with our local DLCD rep through this whole process, because we don't want to get all the way through this process and find that the state's got an issue with it. So we want to keep them updated as we go. And then after that is a task, kind of seeing where we're at with the process once we get to this point. But this would be in September 2025, where we would take a look at area planning. And so when we put forward a document for a proposal for the urban growth boundary, it'll have some high level, kind of very general land use designations for each of those parcels, where employment lands might make most sense to go, where residential, where parks, very high level. I want to call it like the 50,000 foot level, but it's enough to kind of to show the community and show all the folks involved where those different land uses are going to go. Area plans are kind of a further refinement of that. And, you could have different ones based on different geographical locations around the community. In Redmond, where I used to work, I think they had 4 or 5 different area plans, and those are very focused, and they kind of start to take a look at, refining the land use mix, starting to kind of maybe sketch out where major transportation corridors are, taking a look at utility servicing considerations, open space considerations. and start kind of developing some urban, how the character of that area might start to kind of putting some kind of parameters around what the kind of character of development that the community wants to see in those areas. And so, so that's that kind of takes it down. I always kind of describe it as taking it down to the 30,000 foot level. And that's where those kind of plans sit until somebody wants to come in and annex. And then they would come in and typically provide a master plan, which would take it down into the 15,000 foot level. Kind of each step kind of gives more detail in terms of, what the development or what the area is going to look like, followed by a subdivision, which gives you the most detailed look at things. So that's hopefully that was the right amount of information you wanted. Not too little, not too much, but I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? Can I start with Council President Blum?
I don't have any questions.
Okay,
I have no.
no?
A question related to one that I've heard a couple of times around town and I've tried to answer, given the news of some of the things coming out of the legislature this session. The quote, easy urban growth boundary expansion, they see the number that's thrown around is really aimed at larger cities than we are, as I understand it. And so if we were to take that sort of a shortcut route, we could only bring a very small segment of land
Correct.
potentially into the urban growth boundary. And we're looking at 10, 20, 30 years down the road type of an urban growth boundary, are we not?
The more
The
holistic
scope.
expansion.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
So, and also that, just for the record up front, that when a urban growth boundary doesn't mean that land comes in, it stays in the county until some portion thereof is annexed.
That's correct. And if a property owner never wanted to annex, they could remain in the county forever if they
Yep.
wanted to. And it's the city doesn't come forth and propose annexation. We would be waiting for the property owners to approach us.
Do we allow annexations to occur that create an island?
No, it'd have to be contiguous. And
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought, but I just kind of wanted clarity on that. And also just some clarity in the record. Because I think it will come up more than once.
Yes.
And I want to be sure I have my information correct when it does.
Sure.
And I don't have any questions, but I have a couple of comments and some of them are a little bit just so everybody remembers the length of planning that we're doing, and Gary touched on it, 10, 20, 30 years. It was really set forth in a lot of ways by the comprehensive plan and going forward from there. Obviously in the comprehensive plan, we talk a lot about livability and everything, but we also talk about housing needs and employment needs. And we're obviously running out of land, especially when you're looking at the growth projections for 20 years down the road, which right now they're saying around 7,000. So we have to plan according to the state land use laws to plan for that. And at the very least, identify where these lands might be. Again, that doesn't mean that it's automatically getting annexed in. I can give you a couple of history examples that I've learned since I'm in my 4th year as mayor and I'm in my 6th year as council. The woodlands at one time it was Forest Service property, but it became urban growth boundary lands in 1979 was brought into the city, and it wasn't developed at the woodlands until 2019 kind of to start. That was about 40 years. And Mackenzie Meadows was annexed in 2005, and it just recently was built out. So that was almost 20 years. So this isn't, hey, let's double the size of the city in 2 years. That's not happening. Our schedule and timeline for this project is in the packet if you guys are interested. And the timeline just to get to what we're discussing in this contract is all the way through September 2025. So that's at least 18 months, if not longer, just depending on how the process goes. And we, as a city council together, decided that we wanted not just a regular public process, but we wanted a hugely overstated, let's do this in front of everybody so everybody has a shot at having their opinion on this. And there's a steering committee and at least half the items on this is all public engagement. So we want to basically just tell the public and everybody that's here that you're going to have a chance to say what you like or might not like about this process, because we want to hear it. We're putting it out there so we can hear everybody's ideas. We're not scared of it. There are places in Oregon where they recalled the mayor and city council members in King City because they didn't like the outcome of the UGB process. But it's a process that's mandated by state land use law. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do the best job we can to do it in the way that Sisters as a community will be proud of it at the end. And that's what we're going to do. We're looking forward to meeting you all in some of these steering committees and public meetings. Again, they're in here, they're listed. The first one's going to be in, there's going to be a city council update in June after the steering committee is formed in April. And then there's going to be committee meetings and open houses all through this summer and into next year. So.
Tiring me out already.
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. I just thought it's important to just state what we're trying to do here. Again, we're not scared of it. Is it something that's fun? Not really. It's a lot of land use stuff. But again, if we do it right, Sisters 20 years from now, even if it's larger than we would ever want, the fact is, if we do it right, it will still be a fun town that we can all be proud of. And that's the main goal. And that we can all live here amongst each other and hopefully not so close together that we get upset, but
And
there are people coming. So
Yep. And I think the danger of do nothing, which has been suggested by folks in the community, is that A, the state will come in and do it for us, number one.
that's not a good idea.
And number two, do nothing means that the town itself will be under tremendous pressure to keep taking down older homes, some of which are very valuable and add to this community and to the look of this community, and put in much more higher density housing on those lots. And the town itself, if we do nothing, will begin to change, and not necessarily for the good. So, I'm not in favor of making the town a lot bigger, but I also think we need to be realistic and realize that we have to have the land for the town to grow into. And it's how we do that, and how we manage that, and what rules we put in place when we annex that land in. That's our opportunity to have a say will really depend on what we see down the road. And I would like to leave here at the end of my time on this earth and look at it and say, we did okay. So I'm thinking 30 years down the road,
God willing.
God willing.
Okay, before we get to a motion, and
Long enough for another comp plan.
thank you. Does there need to be an amount of the contract on the motion itself?
Not to exceed 239,106.
Okay, that's not on my guidelines motion.
It's not on mine either.
Okay, so I wrote that down.
Thank you.
You want that?
Have you got it written down?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I move to approve a professional service agreement with Moore Iconofano Goldsman, Inc., MIG, for urban growth boundary expansion consultant services not to exceed $239,106.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any final discussion? Council President Blum, anything?
No.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Scott. We appreciate it.
All
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That sounded like 4. Congratulations, everybody.
Couldn't open it.
Good.
Yes.
All right, on to other business and staff comments.
Thank you, Mayor.
Manager Wheeler.
I'll kick this off. We have a few staff members out, but I'll do some staff reports for them. First of all, you might have gotten a notice, there's a Forest Service open house, this is for the public too, on April 9th at 5:30 at the Ranger Station. They got a lot going on right now. A new station under construction. I think a tour will be a part of that at 4:30. But information about all their upcoming projects and some recreation updates and things about burning plans, prescribed burning plans and recreation updates. So I think they do this on an annual basis. They're pretty popular, but that's on the 9th of April
At 5:30, you said?
at 5:30.
5:30.
Thank you. I'm putting it on my
That's it.
calendar right.
Is that the Forest Service open house? Is
Yes.
it April
Yeah.
9th
Yeah.
at 5:30?
I enjoyed it last few years.
Okay.
Yep.
Fire hall? Is it at the fire hall?
I think it's actually at the Rangers.
I think it's at the Rangers too.
Okay,
Because they're doing the
I think I
tour.
read that, yeah.
great. Thank you.
I think you've been receiving the updates on this the legislative session that ended on the 10th. No, the 9th. I think it ended early. But a couple key things there: reforming ballot measure 110. That was House Bill 4002. It passed, and it's complicated, but some fixes there about incentives and treatment options before potential criminal penalties, including that. That was a very popular legislation for the public to provide testimony, long hearings. But if you've been looking at polling and stuff, the public's kind of been asking for the legislature to take something on since ballot measure 110 was passed 3 years ago. Senate Bill 1537 was the housing policy bill. I think the things, I'm just highlighting a couple of there's other bills, but just highlighting a couple of these things. That was a bill related to the Housing Production Office, right? And it's kind of pertinent to our conversation about the UGB and included the fast track UGB process in that bill. One of the things it did include was that, related to they're calling them housing land use adjustments, and that's the variances where developers can have up to 10 kind of passes on variances. So that's something that we kind of saw coming and proposed legislation in the future, and that made it into the Senate bill that was passed. And then Senate Bill 1530 included the funding for some of these things, right? So direct funding for housing projects, but also funding for shelters. All that one-time money that came through states and counties kind of provided this gap of continuous funding. And so this legislation is providing, I think, up to like 60 million, which I imagine some of that will trickle down to
Better.
the coordinated houseless response offices and those projects. All right, switching gears. Paul, he's out today, but to give a brief update on Public Works, there was a advisory board meeting last night, and they reviewed the system development charges, the proposed updates to the water and wastewater SDCs. We're continuing to go through that process, and that will be coming back to council for public hearings in the spring. Right here, look out the window. We got the roundabout well underway. They're moving fast, on schedule. Excavation, especially. I think they have stormwater and ponds to dig out as part of that work and getting it level to get to the subgrade elevation to start, putting in the new roundabout and roadways. So things are moving fast there. It's been kind of fun to watch. I think we're working through the kinks on detours and folks are figuring that out. I've seen more traffic out here, but it's short-lived, that pickup and drop off. And otherwise, I think people are figuring it out. And I know the sheriff's office have been out there every day and keep an eye on things. And speaking of Public Works, again, thank you to our crew. They did a great job this winter. I'm just looking at the long-term forecast and saying, oh, well, maybe that was it. We'll see. Carrie warns me that no, it's still March. Don't jinx it, but we have some spring weather potentially here coming up. So did want to thank them for all their work, plowing the roads and keeping them safe and clear.
For the new people in the area, it has snowed in Rodeo before, so it can
Oh,
happen.
don't say that. Okay.
Jinx. We don't ever bring it up. That's how we keep it from happening.
Oh, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
I didn't mean you. I
Jeez,
meant him.
Rookie mistake there. And then just on finance, we're busy working on the budget. It's that time of year for us. So, Joe's busy with all the spreadsheets and working with staff on putting together the budgets. We got revenues forecasted, plugging in things like the proposed utility rates and SDCs and projects. And so that's always fun to kind of go through and incorporate the council goals and all that. So, and that's, I think you saw the dates for the budget committee meetings there in May. Okay, I know Carrie's got a handful of updates on stuff that she's been working on, some of the stuff that you guys have been involved with too. So
Are you having fun with the budget yourself? as being the first time around?
Yeah, actually, it's a great way. I mean, I was kind of at disadvantage because the budget was adopted right before I got here, but it's a great way to kind of get to know everything, where all the pennies go and stuff. And, yeah, and, Joe and the staff do a great job on it
Tell
too.
me, we
So.
got the city manager budget this year?
Yeah, we cut it, didn't we?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. A couple of different things. The application process closed for our two positions, one for Budget Committee and one for the Planning Commission. One applicant for the Budget Committee was Robin Smith, who has previously been on the Budget Committee. So we will bring his name forward at the next meeting for appointment. And then the PC had two applicants, and those interviews will be the week of April 1st. And so that applicant who's chosen will come forward at the April 10th meeting. So that was good to get those positions hopefully filled soon. We did just do the review for the Leadership Academy. There were 25 applicants, which was phenomenal. It was very difficult to narrow down, so we narrowed down to 12. Thank you to Councilor Cobb and to Jordan for helping with that, as well as C4C. So they'll get notified this week, and our first class will start on the 15th. So that's great, and I'll be reaching out to counselors as far as what your roles might be within that 6-week timeframe. Very, very minimal, Gary. We did meet with CLI, talking to them about the work they're doing out with the houseless, picking up trash and kind of where their work is heading into the new year. They are looking to find some grants for removal of vehicles from the forest, and they're looking to try to get about 15,000 because it is very expensive to remove vehicles, and they keep kind of piling up with them. It was good to talk with them. They're doing a lot of really great work. I met with the farmers market today. They have a new executive director, Holly. Sorry, I just lost her last name. But just talking to them about what they're doing and how they're moving forward this year and what Seed Table is looking at as far as their work. It's always fun to meet with those folks. We are reviewing the grant agreement with Northwest Housing Alternatives. We had started that process about a year plus ago and then put it on hold. And now we're dusting that off, working with our attorneys. I would imagine that you will see that sometime in early summer as far as approval for that agreement for the housing, the 40 units. So working through that. We had one more meeting with the Cultural and Arts District with some group of people. And that was a program that we've just been kind of putting together to see if there's any interest in developing a culture and arts district. The state had been looking into that. Ended up at the end of the meeting that we're breaking down into a small work group that will kind of move forward and see what the actual actions would be to move that forward. So nothing solid yet, but that group is moving forward a little bit on their own with some help from me. And then just a reminder, the statement of economic impact is coming out on Friday. So you'll get sent an email. If you guys have any questions on that, feel free to email or reach out.
15th, yep.
Yep, coming out soon. And then on Monday, and Andrea will be at this too, I believe, is the first meeting of the Regional Housing Council. They're going to be meeting, I believe, the third Monday of every month at this point, Redmond in the evening. So we'll kind of see where they're headed and what they're doing. And then the Sisters Cold Weather Shelter moved their things out of the Main Street building this weekend. I went through and reviewed it. So that building's been closed down, and we're working on the lease with Sisters Makers. So what we got going on.
Sisters Makers have a goal kind of when they want to get in?
May 15th. So the agreement should come towards council on April 10th. They plan on being here to kind of discuss their plans and what they're doing. But May 15th is our date right now.
Okay.
On the regional housing, who did you say was meeting with them?
Andrea is the appointed council
Oh, okay.
person for that.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the name of that group is not Charo, now it's,
This is a different group.
Yeah.
This is a completely different group. Yeah, the Regional Housing Council. Yeah.
just making sure.
This is a new group actually run by COIC. So
Gotcha, okay.
yeah, so we'll see where they go.
Thank you for the refresher.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track.
It's been that was last fall, I think, that we made that appointment.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Scott and Development Service, do you have any other updates? Sure.
Stop me if I get carried away.
Okay. Stop.
That's gonna happen.
We are moving forward with the certification process for the Dark Sky, International Dark Sky. We paid our pre-application fee, so we're in. We're vested under the existing requirements, and it's the start of a process that could take, I've heard it could take up to a year or two to actually get it. Part of that is because they want to see the ordinance in operation for a little time, how it's being implemented prior to that. But one of the recommendations we got from our dark sky consultant was to consider forming a dark sky committee of citizens, interested citizens who are passionate about it to help kind of drive that process forward with staff. So Rima, I've invited Rima to attend the kickoff call for this. The first step is a kickoff a call with your representative over there to kind of get an idea of what more about the process. So that's exciting.
Would we need like an advisory person on council maybe to help bolster that? Because I think Councilor
know what?
Cobb I think she wants one more
I thought
thing.
you were Mr. Idea.
Well, I know that the regional committee kind of thing, that kind of, yeah, you're in the dark, so hey. No, I just thought you might want something. I would love to do it if you.
No,
if you-
I'm not, I'm just teasing with you. I would love to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so maybe, I think we'd have two of us fighting over it at least.
Okay.
So,
3 or 4.
yeah,
Yeah, it's,
never know.
that's fun.
It's a
That's,
good thing.
that's
Yeah.
one of the.
I was trying to throw you a bone and you just like,
You tease me all
Yeah.
the time.
I do.
I think I saw a blurb in somewhere that the Eastern Oregon, a big group of counties.
Yes.
The largest.
They got a whole region, dark sky region adopted.
Yeah.
For Eastern Oregon, which is
It's the biggest one in the
the
country,
biggest one in the world.
in the world, yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
Did you see the news about the town that the mayor took all the street lights down
Yeah,
before the new street lights?
That
were out?
was,
It's like a one-horse town and
Oh, no.
they're all upset.
yeah, that gave me a little shivers.
Yeah, it did me too. I'm getting ideas.
This mayor's not doing that. I'm just gonna say.
It's like she's. I
So
think
you'll let
she
me
is
know
the town-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You may have heard that C4C is going to have an event in May on housing affordability. It's called Who Gets to Live Here? And and Councilor Letts got invited. Kevin Eckert, our own Clayton Crowhurst is going to be on the panel. And then they asked if Emmy would like to be on the panel.
Well, that's
For
good.
A diversity of voices, and they thought that she would be good for that, and I agree.
Yeah.
So, it's May 5th. It's a Sunday from 4 to 5:30. You'll probably hear more about it as time goes.
Is that virtual or in?
It's there. It's in reality. It's in person.
Okay,
It's in the
City.
flesh.
okay.
No, I think it's going to be, well, I want to say it's going to be over at the fire hall, but I don't know
Okay.
for sure yet. We got one application for the Affordable Housing Grant Fund from Habitat, and we are taking the steps to try to start reviewing that application and understanding it with the goal of bringing it to council at some point to have the council weigh in on its proposal, and that should probably be occurring sometime in May or June.
Okay.
The deadline for the URA workforce housing funds is coming up April 1st. So hopefully get some applicants for that. I'm not sure yet, but we'll see. Just had planning commission work session last week. They're starting to work through the tourist commercial zone amendments, tourist commercial zone code amendments. So that's what they're working on. And then they'll start working on the short-term rental too. So they're kind of doing a lot of work sessions on text amendments these days, kind of like the council, but working in tandem with you guys. Hopefully we'll get we got 2 candidates for the planning commission, and hopefully have them on board for the late April meeting. So we got 2 applicants to choose from. That's about it. We've got, a handful of land use applications that are still coming through the door for some downtown projects, some light industrial projects, some lot consolidations, and some more minor things. And then still getting a handful of building permits coming in as well due to Sunset Meadows starting to get going, as well as Woodlands. Apparently things are selling over there as they've gotten units and model homes to show people. They're starting to sell more. And so they're going to be moving on to their next phase. I think they're starting to build their first townhome as we speak. So that'll be a new product out there. Yes.
On the land use apps, are they lower than usual? not using 2021 as usual? Are they lower?
It's a little bit slower, as we're starting to, as there's less and less, available land to develop. And plus, the market for residential has been a little slow over the last year or two with interest rates. So I think that's part of it as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we're good.
Yep. That's it for us. Thank you.
That's it for you guys? Okay. It's up to us. Council President Blum, why don't you go first?
Nothing really to report. All my meetings seem to be next week, so
All right, well, rest up this week and enjoy.
will do.
All right.
I have a couple, both mine, and I've been doing a couple for Council Letts. Urban Forestry Board met earlier this week. The biggest news in a way is that we're losing our very good city forester. He has taken position in the valley, Roseburg, I think. In fact, he was meeting, talking to us from Elkton, the side of the road. And so there has been a request. We reviewed a request for proposal for a new city forester position, and I assume that will be going out soon if it hasn't gone out already. We had a long discussion on heritage trees and quite a bit of stuff in the packet. So I suspect that at some point we will be seeing as a council a recommendation from the Urban Forestry Board to look at some language related to heritage trees and how we might put those in the city, how it might reflect them. And the language would include the potential not only for city street trees, but to look at trees on private property of individuals that want their trees to be identified as a heritage tree. So there's a lot more work to do on that. It seems like an easy process, but it's not, because you're dealing both with private and public property, and there's going to be some other things that have to happen. One of our counselors even volunteered a tree in her front yard. She will remain nameless, even though she's sitting at the table. And then
Wonder who that is.
and then the other problem is we're starting to see some top kill in the East Portal lands, and it's kind of perplexing for Paul and for the forester and others, because that property's never really had much issue. But I think it's another indication of the stress that trees are under with the change in snowpack, change in temperature, and it's caused by the IPS beetle, IPS beetle. So there are 2 or 3 trees in there that will probably be removed within a week, even though they're large trees, but the tops are dead, and that beetle will move from tree to tree to tree to tree and continue to kill the trees. So the idea is to get them out before the beetle becomes active. And this is the 2nd or 3rd tree that they've had to take out up in there. And they're nice looking trees, but once that top dies from the beetle, it's the end. So that's kind of the things that we discussed. And just taking a look here, so I missed anything. I attended the bicycle pedestrian meeting. It's an acronym that I can never remember. In Redmond, the big news out of that was primarily that the county transportation plan went through its first reading, and I think it's coming up at the next meeting for their final approval, and all of the path systems that were identified in the TSP have stayed. And that was a 2-to-1 vote. Councilor Adair made it very clear that she didn't like the idea of any bike pedestrian paths being anywhere in that plan. And so she voted no on it, but Councilor DeBone and
Commissioner Chang.
Commissioner Chang, thank you. Keep seeing Councilor Commissioner Jeff up with it. They voted yes, and I expect that the adoption vote, I would hope, would be the same as well, unless there's been a change of heart. And so what that means is that the trail, which has been identified down the road to sometime between here and Black Butte, is still in the county plan. And that of course will be an issue when it comes up, as we all know. But as I said in my testimony, you got to put it in and give people a chance to have a say. If you don't put it in, it's like any comp plan. If you don't put it in, it's hard to move it forward. So it may die a an ungrateful and ungracious death, or something may happen with it, but it did make it through. I was surprised. I didn't think it would. And that's what I have. I will be attending the EDCO meeting tomorrow morning, 8:30. Who schedules meetings in Bend at 8:30 in the morning? We're gonna run
That's almost
over.
like a job.
We're gonna run over him with my truck when we see him in the street, and it's not you, and I know that. But I know who it is, and so I'll have something for us the next meeting for that, and filling in for Councilor Letts again.
Okay. She's just got 3 pages.
Beg your pardon?
No.
So a couple of people talked to me this morning, that one works, volunteers with CLI, and the other volunteers with, the farmer's market and Seed to Table. And they're very curious to know what the city is negotiating or doing relative to the unhoused. And I know things are going on, good things, meetings and whatnot. But I think what I'd like to suggest is that some kind of communication here or in the newspaper that just says, by the way, these are the things that are being looked at. These are the things that are happening to move the needle a little bit for coming up with, some kind of final solution for our unhoused.
We talked to CLI yesterday actually and got an update on kind of the things they're doing. The coordinated houseless response office is working on sort of this roadshow concept, right? Because it's not just sisters questions coming from sisters country folks. It's countywide, right? They hear of all these different committees and offices and money being spent towards something, but it's like, what's been done? What are you guys doing? And so I think, that was one of the big debates at the last coordinated houseless response office meetings was how much do we spend? How much do we focus on, telling the public what's going on and kind of describing that. And, then for our purposes out here, it's a little bit different. So that message and that, those stories are maybe a little bit different compared to what's being invested in Bend or Redmond. But I think what maybe the lesson here is, we probably have our own kind of messaging too about not just what the county and what this coordinated houseless office is doing, but things that we're working on locally here, and some of just highlighting again the great volunteer networks that we have. That's what's happening mostly out here is the volunteers that you're meeting with, the volunteers that we met with yesterday. Like they're out there, and you can take a tour with them and go on a ride along with the stuff that they're doing. But maybe that's what we should just trumpet that out a little bit more. And then, we've been working internally on the next step towards working on, what do we do before the next smoke season, cold weather season? What are the, ideas and options that we have coming up and how to incorporate the public on that? So we're meeting with our agency partners, and then we're going to expand the net and include some nonprofits and volunteers, and then kind of go from there. And as we talked about goal setting, part of that is engaging with COIC on the facilitation work too.
Okay. Then that was another piece of it was these two people were aware of several other people who would like to help, but they don't know how to help. So I think you were indicating, Jordan, that there will be opportunities that would be communicated.
Yeah, and there's existing opportunities today. I mean, I think CLI, others, cold weather shelter, there's volunteers that are doing things, and I think
Right.
welcome more
Yeah.
volunteers to help clean up all that stuff that's going on. Yeah.
So I don't know, would the city then make some kind of statement of, these are the various organizations that you can volunteer with? Like in the paper or something relative to, the unhoused.
I wonder if that should come from us. I don't have a problem if it does, or if that's not a bad idea, but maybe it needs to come either as an editorial or a letter to the editor saying, while we work on a long-term permanent solution, whoever says it, these are all the groups in town that are working, the volunteer groups. Here's a list of them. Here's how you contact them. Join up with one.
Yeah.
Help out, help move the needle. And I don't know if I don't have a problem with the city saying it, but I don't know if it's as effective if the city says it as if it came from someone else, because it may sound like we're kicking the can down the road rather than trying to look for solutions, which I know that everybody is working on. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion. I think what you said is very good. I just think that how do we let people know? We know who the groups are because we hear from them and we know them, but the person who lives next door to me might not know who the groups are.
And I like the way you couched that with starting with saying, this is what we're doing in the background. We've got things going on and, you know, you public, you,
And maybe it's
that are
trying to get
interested.
each
Yeah.
of the different sort of leaders of those
Yeah.
groups in with Jim and do some kind of a thing in the paper that just talks about it.
Right. And I think it's, you know, I don't think it hurts to also highlight what we don't do and in some ways can't do. You know, we're not a city staff-wise that is big enough to have like an office of homelessness or even have, you know, one dedicated position for that. What we do is we do it as a group. The staff does, and everybody shares responsibilities and adds that to their already busy schedules. I know Carrie was focal point for a number of months, if not years, just in the position that she was in, but she can't do it by herself either. I mean, she has many other responsibilities, and that just kind of got thrown at us during a very crazy time, post-COVID expansion, and the conversations we're having, even with CLI, we're still seeing more homeless, not less. So this is not a problem that's going away. And we have to just acknowledge that and realize that we're all talking about it and that we're even having the conversations is a lot more than we were doing 3 years ago. 3 years ago, CLI didn't even exist, I don't think. And so there's a lot of stuff going on for sure. Not all of it's ready to throw out to the public, but at the same time, you know, we can probably do something a little better. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Yeah,
And
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, yeah.
We all have here's the thing, everybody's having the conversations. It's in a lot of small groups. It's just not in bigger forums as often because there's just a lot of little things in the works. You know, Counselor Blum is on 2 different houseless committees, and you know, one of them is brand new, and we're going to find out more next month and kind of see what that's all about because we just don't know yet. You know,
Yep.
so that's a conversation that's always going to be evolving. But at the same time, one thing that I will always do is highlight what's working because what's working is usually scalable. If it's a good program, it's scalable in some ways, and I think that we're going to hear about things over the next 6 months that are working in Sisters that other communities are going to try and replicate because they're actually working here.
Well, and I think we talked about volunteers. You mentioned more, a population in the woods is growing, not receding. And I fully expect we will see, when the warm weather hits, we'll see an increase because we have the folks that kind of move around during the summer. They'll come over here while the weather's good and be in the forest, and some of them will leave in the fall. But the need to service those individuals and with something CLI is doing is there. It doesn't make any difference why they're here or how long they're here. What it is matters is that they're here.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, obviously, because if you take care of them too well, then you attract possibly more. You get you know, and so we have to always try and concentrate. Yes, we're doing our best to help people, but we're also trying to help people out.
Right.
And help people to the place that they need to be.
Yep.
And some of them want things that we can't provide, and some of them want an actual house or a place to live, and some of them don't want to talk to you. So it's hard.
Some of them have been from other areas of the United States, and we end up, the cold weather shelter people end up helping them get back to their families because they didn't have the finances to do that. So there's like, as you're alluding to, Mayor, there's a huge variety of why these people are unhoused.
There's no
Yeah.
one solution.
Yeah.
one of the things I appreciate about CLI especially is they're very narrowly focused on, you know, having our forest campers have clean places and they help with the trash and they provide water. And they're adding a little bit of scope this year with vehicle removal and helping the ranger station do that. But it's one of the reasons it's, and they admit this themselves, is that it's successful is because it's very narrowly focused.
Well, but I think it also addresses a very specific need. Having gone into the forest and cleaned up camps where nothing was ever done.
Right.
And filling, you know, 30-yard dumpster and could have filled a second. We filled up old vehicles that were gonna get hauled off instead. I mean, you realize that if you don't stay ahead of some of these issues, they get real big.
Yeah. And that's
And
part of
that-
their,
yeah,
that's
they
part of their
do.
mission.
Yep,
That's part of their
That's
mission
what they
too.
do, yes.
So do we have basically kind of a nod that maybe something could be put in the paper by the city manager or something with,
We can talk about that. You want to talk about that sometime and we'll,
okay,
It's not in the paper. I mean, there's other ways to
yeah,
kind of put out information.
Yeah.
for the
Okay.
I think
progress.
that there's something we could probably do.
thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else? Okay. I was going to talk about CLI, but I already kind of have. Obviously, you've already heard, we met with them yesterday. And the thing I'll say about it is I really, again, appreciate the narrow scope that you guys are doing. And I think that it's open and candid conversations that are going to make it successful between not just you guys, but us as well. And just,
They've done a great job.
yeah. So I hope that just keeps going and we just strengthen that relationship as we go. Other than that, I really don't have anything. So let's go home. Other checks to sign?
Nope, we took care of it.